Welcome, Paul, and thanks for joining me on the Legends of Recruiting conversation. I've spent 25 years in recruiting, and in doing this, I like to have authentic, interesting conversations with my recruiting friends and talk about trends, where things are going. And I've had a front row seat, I found, to the recruiting industry, and I found that what's often missing is the art of recruiting. And it's in this world of AI and keyword search, what recruiters miss today is the storytelling, the candidate experience, the wow that inspires someone to consider joining a company. And that'll be a theme of some stuff we talked about. But I invited my friend Paul Kemp today, and is that he's been a friend for over 25 years. We've known in Seattle, and from AT&T Mobile and Starbucks, and even a company that built up and sold a few owners, and can talk about that. So, anyways, that's why I invited you here, and you're someone I've respected a lot, and we've done a lot of partnership and work over the years. So welcome, Paul.
Hey, good morning, Paul. Thanks for having me.
So maybe just to kick things off, why don't you walk us through a few of your recruiting career highlights? Just give us like the Paul Kemp recruiting story.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate to start off in executive search, retained search, and that was a learning curve for me. First job out of school, and prospecting for candidates and meeting with clients, and not really knowing any industries or businesses. Learning how to learning how to get the information that you need to match the opportunities to the right candidates and the right skills. Um, It was mostly non-technical finance and accounting, and I did see the future in technical recruiting. So I went and did a contract at Microsoft. I learned corporate recruiting and technical recruiting there, the systems, the processes, the technique, kind of the science that goes with the art. And from there, I went to AT&T Wireless, 7 years. Did another 7 year stint at T-Mobile. Went to a pre-IPO. Kind of peripheral wireless company, a content provider, and did an IPO there. And then I went back to a big corporate brand in Starbucks with the employee value proposition that I wanted to have more of. I wanted to have that brand that you can really feel good about bringing people into and being a part of. And from there, I was recruited. Well, I got a call from you and went to a company that went through a couple of liquidity transactions, was, you know, completely private when I got there. We took an investment, then we became a joint venture, then we became wholly owned by a big German corporation, Continental, tires and automotive parts, and uh, and then I just recently departed there after selling the entire company, not a joint venture, to a private equity firm.
Congrats.
So that brings us up to today. That's 30 years in a minute.
So you've seen it all. You've seen thousands of things that work and don't work. Uh, I mean, when you're a recruiting leader at like T-Mobile or Starbucks, I mean, you're kind of a rock star because all the hiring managers, they're dying for talent. Hyper growth environment. What? Give me a feel for like the scale and complexity. Like how many hires were you making at T-Mo and Starbucks, and what's a team look like? I'm just trying for context to get a feel for what that looked like.
Um, Well, that is a really good question. And, you have 20 recruiters dedicated to like engineering and IT and corporate functions. And, at Microsoft, they were realistic. They expected like 3.5 hires per month per recruiter. But you get into a volume setting, AT&T Wireless or T-Mobile, where you have fewer recruiters and a lot more openings. And, the recruiters are filling internal and external candidates. Sometimes they're filling, 10 a month is a metric that we were shooting for oftentimes, not just 3.5 new external hires. And so, yeah, the volume is something that you have to manage, and you try to get the recruiters to have a blend of newly opened in interview and final stage recs at any given time so that they can keep the momentum and flow. So that's you and I talk about the art and the science of recruiting, and the process has to support the volume that you're at, the tools, but then also, scheduling. When scheduling was manual, it had to be supported in order to keep the right momentum and things like that. So the process has to be able to support a recruiter at scale.
Totally. Well, I always think when you're recruiting leader in-house, you're the hero because I'm on the outside as an exec recruiter. It's easier to focus on a few roles, but you have so many roles and every hiring manager talking to you and all these inbound resumes and it's like order and chaos, man. So I respect getting those laying the plane on a few roles. Well, tell me some trends. I mean, you've had a front row seat to watch things. What are a few ways recruiting's changed from when you were kind of first started? And you kind of, I know it's like a little flashback what that was like, but just how has recruiting changed over the years? Are there a few things that came to mind?
Well, this is really going to date me, but you know, running print classified ads and receiving curly resumes off the fax machine, that was still happening when I joined AT&T Wireless. And before that, I was at Microsoft, and we didn't have internet access to every terminal. We had a terminal that had internet access, and that's how we accessed Monster.com, the first online job posting job board. And so the evolution of online job boards
Hmm.
to become the go-to place to put the word out that you're hiring, and then optimizing your career page, and new networking tools like LinkedIn obviously was the go-to. LinkedIn Recruiter was like the ultimate tool when it first came out, but now with AI coming into play, how to utilize AI without your process becoming completely impersonal is the current trend and challenge that we're all facing.
I remember, I totally relate, little flashback, mailing resumes to my clients. I would mail the resume. I would send a cover letter and have like a stack of 5 resumes and mail them to the client and then wait a few days and they would call me. And I mean, like, and then faxing was instant. So I felt like the move to email and faxing was like so fast. And this LinkedIn
Uh,
thing was incredible, like the whole database of the world. And I feel like we're going through another big change as well in the AI, just with how it's affecting things. It probably as much that email, internet, and LinkedIn did before. So it's an interesting to see
Mailing
it go.
resumes, or for local clients, taking a stack of resumes to a weekly meeting to go through them and write notes right on them. I remember how impressed I was when you could take a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet and attach, link, or embed the resume into that, and how streamlined that felt at the time to be able to send your internal hiring manager or your external client,
Yeah.
here's the resume, here's the profile, and here's my comments and summary of the candidates.
So you've seen great recruiting. You've been part of some world-class organizations that really lead the industry on recruiting. What do you believe separates like the great recruiting from just kind of mediocre recruiting that everyone else is doing?
For me, number one, it's the candidate experience. Just I had a marketing person tell me years ago that every interaction that you have with somebody, internal or external, it either builds the brand or it erodes the brand. And recruiters come in contact with online, as well as in conversations and in person and virtual interviews. Recruiters touch so many people, and every interaction can enhance how they feel about your company or erode their perception of your company. And so I think it really starts, that's at the core of recruiting, is always be building and do your best not to erode the brand.
I can't experience a good buzzword in recruiting, but like, how does it matter? Is it a feel good thing? And I was curious, like, what are a few things practical you did to have a wow experience with candidates?
Worked at a lot of companies that want to automate the interaction with candidates. And so they apply and they didn't check all the right boxes, or they didn't say that they have a skill that the job needs. And originally technology would allow you to immediately respond with an email saying, "Sorry, you don't meet the posted requirements, but keep trying." And just moving that form letter to something that was a little bit more positive about being grateful that they were interested enough to take the time to apply. And even at one of the companies that I worked for, we set the timer to not respond to applicants instantly that they
Hmm.
were rejected, because we wanted it to at least feel like there had been more consideration of their qualifications. And so we'd have it wait a couple days to tell people. But the main thing is just how you can't take the standard template template from
Mhm.
the applicant tracking system and just turn all those notifications on and think that you're communicating appropriately with the candidates. You've got to rewrite every one of them to match your brand and your company's voice. Just like an internal communication needs
Mhm.
to have a company voice and speak to the target audience. And with candidates, you need to have your employee brand, employment value proposition needs to come through in how you speak to people, even in a form email or a template
Yeah,
or an online response that pops up on their screen.
I like to think of the candidate experience. Like when you go to a nice hotel, like a five-star hotel, they think about the little details when you show up. They know your name. Maybe there's a certain drink or music in your room or mint on your pillow or these little moments of wow that aren't a big deal or expensive, but it just shows you did the extra touch. And I found that with candidates, just yeah, acknowledging them, listening to them, uh, having an email response that doesn't sound soulless or HR black hole, but one more authentic conversation, and to also just using videos more and just thinking of the when they come on site having it be a great experience because you may interview 10 people, but you want everyone speaking well about the company and saying good things about you because another role could come up or they may have a buddy you may want to hire later. So just making it a great experience and a wow for the brand. Because I mean, like Starbucks, they buy coffee, or at T-Mobile, they buy phones, and just like these are your customers you're talking to, not just candidates. And in fact, did wasn't there a story at T-Mobile where you started offering like phone discounts or plans to candidates and converting the customers as part of the process?
We tried to target our customer base in as many ways as we could without harassing them or creating a negative perception. But we even would offer spiffs to our customers if they referred candidates to us. So the employer referral program, extending that to our customer base or even non-customers, but just in the marketing materials, having links to your career page or getting marketing to say we're hiring in as many places as possible on your website and in marketing collateral when it used to be hard
Mhm.
copy and now that it's digital and online has helped a lot in getting the word out that promoting the fact that it's not just a great wireless service provider, but it's a great place to work.
Yeah. So lesson learned. I mean, our firm's worked around 1,000 searches last 20 years, and we've made our share of mistakes. I mean, over the years, I'm definitely not perfect. But just was there a mistake you made, Paul, early in your recruiting career that taught you a lasting lesson about attracting and evaluating talent that you use today?
I think early in my career, I had a recurring problem of thinking I understood what the company did, what the team did, and therefore what the position had to do in order to be successful. And I would jump too quickly to thinking I understood all of that, not
Hmm.
ask enough questions, not be curious enough to fully understand how this role contributes to the team outcomes and how the team outcomes contribute to the department level outcomes and how that drives the business plan for the year and the long-term strategy. And so as I progressed in my career, I started asking many more and much better questions about what are we trying to do here and not just taking the requirements of the job, like the coding language needed or the accounting package that was used for the accounting position, but really understanding like what it would be like to be a member of that team and what are the deliverables, how do you quantify that, what are the performance metrics, and then why is that important to the company, why is that new headcount even in this year's budget.
Totally agree. That's why you're a recruiting legend. But yeah, having outcomes focused, like why does the job exist? How do you know you have a win? And asking the business questions first about how it impacts the company, why the role's open, and just being intellectually curious. I do find that's what separates the good from the great recruiters. They're curious about the company and the story, and they know more than just what's given to them on the job description page. So
And
why do you
yet
love it, Paul? Have you done this for a while? What's kept you in this? I mean, your skills and experience, you could have gone for a lot of different roles and industries. What kept you in recruiting and inspired?
I've been told I'm an optimist and I have a pretty positive attitude, and spending year after year trying to storytell and share with people why coming to work for this company would be a good move for them it builds my positive energy. I build positivity by sharing why this role, why this company, why you right now. Um, and that doesn't just mean that I sugarcoat everything and I only present like the positives of the role. I've found that in a lot of cases, telling someone, especially at senior levels, telling people the problems that you're trying to solve, what's broken, software companies with tons of tech debt holding them back, you
Hmm.
can't hide that from somebody. They're going to show up and they're going to hear about it in the interview before they even show up day one. So the full disclosure of this is why this is challenging, fun, and interesting because we're going to solve these problems. We're going to build the product or the service that people want in the future. Being able to share that with people and have them become a part of it. And having worked at a couple of small to mid-sized companies where those people that you hire, you end up seeing them in virtual meetings or in person in the break room, having lunch at a table in the break room with
Hmm.
people that you recently hired or hired a few years ago, and you get that instant feedback of how good was your storytelling, how
Hmm.
realistic was the reality versus the expectations, and just being interested in hearing what people have to say. You get that continuous feedback loop to apply back to your continuous improvement as well.
Totally. Favorite interview question? What do you love to ask, and what are you looking for?
Well, it's my favorite. It's not that creative, but normally after I've asked a few questions about successes and things that people have done in a positive way to contribute to their team and company success, then my favorite is to ask them to tell me about a time when a deliverable or a project did not go as well as
Hmm.
they had hoped or planned.
Hmm.
And hearing people describe how they took the wrong approach or did the wrong thing, and then how they course corrected, how they adjusted to how they reacted to that failure, or delivering something that was less than their best work is oftentimes the best way to hear about how they themselves have learned from that and applied that learning to what they did next. So the people who do that the best, and maybe it's the more senior they get, the more failures they've had and the more comfortable they are talking about it, but the people the best answer to that question is not like why it failed or whose fault it was. It's what they learned from it, and the continuous learning that goes back to the being curious and wanting to learn from mistakes and
Hmm.
not duplicate that mistake and next time do it even better. Oftentimes that's the best question that leads to the best part of the conversation with a candidate is them describing something that didn't go well.
I love that question, Paul, because it shows humility, EQ, kind of learning from it. And I found also that best leaders are pretty quick to laugh and tell stories where they really screwed something up, what they learned from it. And then there's pattern recognition to not do it again. And I think that's a really good thing. I get nervous when people have only had wins. It's like you're
Yeah.
overdue for a fail. What
Yeah.
so sometimes recruiting can get stuck in this mode of just butts and seats. We're just trying to fill roles, and and that's your metrics for filling the jobs, which obviously is the big E on the eye chart for recruiting. But as a recruiting leader, you're talking with hiring managers and execs. How do you measure the impact of recruiting beyond just filling the role?
Um, well, butts in seats can lead to mistakes and learnings because filling the empty seat with the wrong butt can get you in trouble. It can get you in trouble with your HR partners that end up dealing with poor managers or poor performers or people that just aren't collaborative and contributing to the success. And so you can't focus simply on butts and seats. And so I go back to what I said a minute ago about looking at the outcomes.
Mhm.
I've been fortunate enough to be in a senior leadership role for the past almost 10 years, where the being in the room when the budgeting is being discussed and finalized and taking the time to sit in on each department's presentation about what they need funding wise and headcount wise while they're setting their budget and their annual operating plan, delivering those results is what matters. And so if a software team gets headcount approved to add 10 people, but you can't get the senior people that they wanted and you're encouraging them to hire for potential, you'll get better energy, you'll get somebody who's going to be driven and motivated. But if you get 10 people that are inexperienced and don't accomplish the same amount of work as what the plan had called for from having 10 senior people that you were unable to find, you don't get the business outcomes. And so you have to have skin in the game. You have to be committed to the executive team that you're hiring isn't just going to be a numbers game where you check boxes and say, I hired the people, but you didn't get the outcomes. I need to be um, measured on whether or not the company succeeds. That's one
Mhm.
reason. That's one of the things I love about recruiting is you have an impact on the business,
Yeah,
and you need to fill those seats with people that are qualified to get the business outcomes, not just people, not just a chair that's warm.
totally. I think yeah, talking about how we're going to win, it's, increasing sales, increasing efficiencies, or solving a problem, or just distraction. Like if you're a CFO and you're down a VP finance, you have two jobs, and so you'd like to get back to one job. I mean, there's some pieces of just distraction that can be there. Wanted to talk about storytelling and so I guess what role have you found storytelling plays and how you pitch your company's mission and culture and maybe an example that how that actually practically plays out in the recruiting flow?
I think the storytelling starts with the job description that you post, and you and I have had conversations about putting in the job description. What will you do? What will your manager expect you to have done in 90 days or 6 months? What is this job? Why are we filling this position? It's to accomplish these business outcomes. And so being as specific as possible in the job description gives you a head start on the story that you tell when you have your first phone conversation or virtual meeting with a candidate, and you only have to clarify what the expectations are. You don't have to define them verbally every single time you talk to somebody. So the storytelling is really painting a picture for the candidate of what the job is, but I tend to spend more time focused on the fact that this is a values-based company. So this isn't results at all costs. At companies like T-Mobile, the very values-driven company, you'd hear senior leaders talk about sharp elbows or breaking glass doesn't really get long-term success for people here. You need to collaborate cross-functionally time and time again. So you can't burn bridges along the way. So explaining that to people, um, I would always try to explain that to people after I'd ask them how they got results, how they got things done on time, how they resourced teams cross functionally when they didn't have dedicated resources to get everything done and had to go to other departments or other teams.
Mhm.
And so hearing them talk about how they got results would allow me to respond by amplifying how this is a values based company that's also big on collaboration and teamwork, like what you just described. Or
Mhm.
I could ask clarifying questions about what was the impact on the other team that you burdened with your problem at the end of the
Mhm.
quarter because you had a deadline you had to meet.
Yeah, when we walk in on a search, oftentimes we'll have companies say, "Yeah, we just can't find good people." And I look at the internal job description and I'm like, "Man, it just says there's 20 soul-sucking things you can do and you don't know why. Are you interested?" I'm like, "Would you quit your job for this?" And like, "No." And so I just found that I think in the heart of all of us, whether it's an exec or entry level, that we want to be a hero. Like, I want to go to work and make a difference. I want to be part of some story that says something about me, what I value, and there's some alignment there. And that story about, why the company exists, where we're going, you could make an impact and do something. I think there's just something in our soul that all of us want to be part of a story. And I think that you can tap into that sometimes as recruiters. And a lot of times when I sit down with a CEO or hiring manager, they have a great story in person. You say, "Why did you come here? Why should someone quit their job and come here?" And what they say is really interesting. I'm leaning forward, I'm taking notes, like, this is great. And a lot of times just trying to capture that, that energy and those authentic words that a real human would say about why they're there and where they're going. You've done a really good job of that over the years. And I've been part of some great brands too, but I think that helps. What's a creative win? I'd love to hear a story, maybe a unconventional strategy to go track down some talent that other people haven't thought of and how it turned out. Just I want to I want to hear a
Yeah.
Kemp story.
I don't know that I'm the most creative recruiting leader that you'll talk to, but one thing that I am is very open-minded and willing to try new things. And so I think the creative wins come from trying something that you haven't done before. And you have to try a lot of new things to find one that works. And so I've been at companies where it was all about like more postings and spend more money to boost your online postings, get more visibility through the existing tools. But I've also partnered with our sales and marketing group and our engineering group. And it's like, what trade groups and
Mm,
associations do you interact with that we might be able to come with you to those events? And you can't just show up at a trade show where you're selling software or a product or a service and start trying to recruit everybody else's people. But promote, but being in the room with like the Seattle Python Developers Network, hosting those events in person in your office so that people can see that there's a positive vibe and it's a
mm,
great culture and environment. Finding ways to showcase that. Also, virtual and online. I've been at companies where we were the first ones to try something virtual, a virtual, augmented reality environment where
mm,
we're not in there trying to sell people something. We're in there promoting the fact that we're hiring for positions and bringing those, virtual opportunities back to the real life for people that are participating in those. And so I think it's just I think creativity just comes from being willing to try new things and
mm.
not just continually year after year trying to optimize the existing process, but try to add to it and be willing and open-minded.
I love that open house speaker story. I've seen other companies use that successfully. Just it's really cheap. I mean, as far as get some food and drink, get a speaker, and then you get people to come into your door and see your office and environment and an industry event. But it's a nice low barrier way to get someone to check you out. And I've heard many companies say they got a lot of hires from doing that because you got someone through your door, which is part of the goal. So,
We ask all the new hires, day one, new employee orientation. We ask the new hires about how they heard about us. We're not a name that everybody recognizes. So how did you hear about us? Who told you about this opportunity? What associations or memberships? Like, where do you spend your time? So, I would partner with the person who facilitated new employee orientation. We'd have a meet and greet with the leadership team at the end of the day. It was in person pre-COVID. It became virtual as we became more and more of a virtual company. But we would talk to people about where they spent their time outside of work or in addition to their work tasks, and then see if there were opportunities to go there to promote the brand.
So recruiting's a two-sided marketplace. You got to sell the candidate and the hiring manager, and we're like a white collar dating service in the middle trying to get them together. But not all hiring managers honestly know how to recruit that well. They're doing head of engineering or finance. But I guess what have you learned works to align the hiring manager to help sell and close the winners that you want?
Um, every company I've been at, big or small, or big, medium, or small, I've always told the hiring manager that as a people manager, part of the reason why you get the pay package that you get, maybe you get a bigger bonus because you're a people manager. Maybe you got a raise when you became a manager for the first time. I make sure they know that they own keeping their team staffed. They
Hmm,
own hiring.
hmm,
I will help them make good hiring decisions. And then you have to be able to back that up, not just by answering their questions, being accessible throughout the process and coaching them and giving them feedback, but having some online, it started off as probably a three-ring binder back in the day, but having a hiring manager toolkit. So when you bring somebody in from another company that's hired under their processes with their recruiting team, that's all they know. And so you
hmm,
have to know that they only know what they've done before, whether it's not been a hiring manager or
hmm,
hired at a different company. So you have to give them the tools that explains the process and have recruiters that are willing to sit down with new hiring managers and tell them, you own the process, but I'm here to help you be successful. Here's how you
hmm,
post. Here's how we will discuss
hmm.
qualifications of candidates before we make contact with them. This is how I'll pre-qualify. This is how you'll pre-qualify. And all the way through to having them start thinking the first intake meeting. Think about who you want to be on the interview loop. You don't just want your team to make a decision in a silo. So who are your stakeholders where you want to pull in an interviewer? And so just giving the hiring manager ownership of the process that's very well supported and telling them right up front, we're going to help make you successful and get the best possible hire and following through on that commitment. You got to follow through on your commitments as well. Set clear expectations,
Yeah.
exceed them.
It's like, hey, we're a good partnership here, but you're ultimately in charge of hiring to meet your goals and bonuses. So don't beat on my department. We're not this internal department just to push on. We're here to collaborate and partner, but it's a choice, and you need to have that healthy communication and working together. I like that. Um,
Even when the employment market is full of qualified candidates, it's critically important that the hiring manager knows that this is going to happen fast. You're going to have to dedicate time to the hiring process to talk to candidates and talk to your recruiter, and we need to respond to candidates very quickly and keep that momentum. Even if there are tons of candidates applying, you're not going to get the best of the best if the process isn't fast enough to meet the candidate's
mhm.
expectations. And so hiring managers need to know that, be reminded of that up front and through the process.
I think people forget, people work for people, not for companies. And so the number one reason you found in research that people choose a company is who they're working for. Like you're working for
Yep.
Amy or Todd and like you like them and you want to spend time with them and the number one reason people leave is who they work for. So it's kind of, so I think just a chance to sell them and sell the person and is often missed as a step. There's a good job selling the company maybe, but maybe selling who you're working for and spending time with and you respect, I think is missed sometimes. It's an easy thing to add on. I want to talk about culture fit. So that term is used all the time, good culture fit, and we all want a culture fit. But what does it actually mean? And how would have you practically screened for it?
Yeah, I've heard from candidates that when they're told you're not the right culture fit, that can feel like we didn't like you. We don't
Totally.
think that you're enough like us to be a part of us. And so I've personally and with my recruiting teams, I've tried to turn that more around to a values alignment. And it's,
Mhm.
still painful to tell somebody that like your values don't align with our values, but being able to tell someone that getting results at all costs and leaving scorched earth in your wake is not going to fit here.
Hmm.
So, when someone feels like they are well qualified for the job based on checking the boxes on the job description, you have to be able to communicate to them that the values alignment, the way we operate here is not going to be a great fit for them. They're not going to succeed. They're not going to thrive in your environment if their style is counter to your values and your culture. But it is a challenging conversation to have, and you have to be very careful not to make it feel too personal.
Give me an example, like here is a specific value and the question we asked to see if they actually had it or not.
I think it comes out for me, it's oftentimes come out in how they've gotten the results that they've gotten.
Hmm.
And if the results have been had, and people will say openly, like I got this through brute force and
Hmm.
tenacity. I'm very stubborn, I'm tenacious, and you know, when you're describing a team environment and collaboration and getting more out of the group than the sum of its parts, that individual drive is not going to get the same results in your environment. And so, oftentimes when people give examples of like that, I'll immediately respond that that's not, basically that's not how we roll here. That's
Mhm.
that's not the best way to get results in this environment. A lot of times they'll self-select out, if
Mhm.
they've been in a brutal environment and that other people don't want to be a part of, but they they love it. They
Mhm.
love the results at all costs, and it doesn't matter who you hurt along the way. They're not going to be happy in your culture and environment if you're collaborative and team focused and getting results as your individual contribution should contribute to the team's contribution to the department to the company.
Mhm.
And mercenaries don't always thrive in a values based environment.
I've seen culture fit used a lot for I just didn't like them or they're not like me. And I think that that term is a professional way of just saying that sometimes, but going the next level of like, what is the value? What's a question we ask? I'm thinking of one sales team we were recruiting for, and they had the competitive was one of their values. And so we often would talk, hey, what things you do outside of work, and people would talk about competitive sports they played or some hobby that they do competitively or really into. And it's interesting, you see these attributes in their personal life that carry over into work, not the other way around. And that's one thing they found, or puzzle solving, or something like that. And you see some, example of a puzzle they solved and they got into and they tell a story and they light up, versus some people look at you like a deer in headlights, like I don't do that. So not saying it's perfect, but it is a clue. Um, so how do you keep it
I
real?
think it's
Like,
also
go
Paul. I
ahead.
think it's also
Go ahead.
important in the debrief with the interviewers. These are mostly virtual nowadays, but I've always tried to have the debrief as quickly as possible after the interview day. So if it can't be that afternoon because the interviews ran late, it's the next morning. But the recruiters need to be strong enough in the debrief to speak up and say, I'm not going to let two or three people just say culture fit and we're going to move on. We need to quantify that with something that's more tangible. So I think getting some true tangible reasons why the person wouldn't thrive in your environment needs to come out of the interview debrief and from the interview feedback so the recruiter isn't left trying to bluff their way through telling a candidate that they're not
Mm.
moving forward in the process.
People are looking for authenticity, especially Gen Z. How do you keep the recruiting process real and authentic without it feeling overly scripted and just a machine?
Well, we talked about storytelling and I don't script my interviews. I will, based on the profile, based on what I know about the candidate, I will write down two or three things that I want to clarify or confirm, but it's more conversational. So the storytelling where you're talking about the opportunity and its impact to the business and trying to match that to the person's interests and strengths, it's not scripted.
Hmm.
You need to have an outline so you don't forget to get the information that you need out of the interaction with the candidate, but not scripting every interaction with the candidates is a great way to not become robotic. But you want to be consistent. You want every candidate to have an opportunity to provide the same information so that it's fair. And so it's a matter of not scripting how you say what you say or the order, having an organic conversation with the candidate, but making
Hmm.
sure that you get your same four bullet points.
Hmm.
The follow-up questions to their general examples is usually where you get to the specifics across each candidate for the same job. So it's consistency without it being a script.
You've probably learned a sixth sense in recruiting, just with people and filling roles. Like, let's say you have a half hour initial screen, as you're doing a video chat with a candidate. How many minutes in do you typically know, like, this person is gonna, I'm gonna like him in advance or not? I mean, obviously, but it's like, what would you guess? Like a 30-minute phone screen, like, or a video screen? How far are you typically in when you're like, I kind of know my answer, yes or no?
Um, Well, a long time ago, I rolled out behavioral interview training at the company that I was at. And so I went to a train the trainer session, and then I facilitated training for quite a few groups of hiring managers and interviewers. And by telling those groups over and over again that you can trust your gut, but you need to validate it. So if your first impression of the person is negative, you need to have enough questions and enough conversation to validate that impression. And a lot of times the candidates come around and impress you with
Hmm.
their other examples and their other answers to your questions further into the conversation. And so yeah, first impressions. I mean, I love it when I meet someone like you and we hit it off and we have similar interests and similar values. And, from start to finish, it's a good interaction. But when people come in and for whatever reason, you or I might show up for an interview and not be our best selves when we first start. The days of in-person interviews and getting caught in traffic and trying to find a place to park and trying to find the right building and the right uh, place to check in, and then being put in a room and sat, sitting there to stew for a minute. And so, just being empathetic to what the candidate is going through or not knowing what the candidate's been going through. And they pop up on the screen, you start firing off questions. It might not be the best interaction. And so having a little empathy to
Mm-hmm.
set the right tone and allow them to highlight their full self is really important.
Totally agree. I find 3 to 5 minutes in, I'm usually feeling like this is I like them or I don't like them. But then I try to do the opposite. If I really like them, let me ask hard questions just to challenge my assumption. Or if I'm not liking them, let me see if I can clarify the question and give them a chance to step up. And I have been surprised both ways sometimes, but man, after doing this for 25 years, it's surprisingly accurate. It kind of weirds me out how accurate. I'll talk to someone and say that's the person, that's your next CFO, and I have that feeling, and that usually happens, but not all the time. But I get surprised. But it's amazing how you start just getting this gut feel, which I think the movie or the book Blink from Malcolm Gladwell just see the pattern recognition in your brain over the years, just seeing what works and what doesn't. So.
Well, if someone is not a good fit for the role, if you have 30 minutes, schedule them 10 minutes to confirm that they're not qualified for the job that you're talking to them about. Sometimes people think that they're qualified because they've done something adjacent or that they think that you're going to train them and teach them how to do the job. So I probably wasn't very good at it earlier in my career. I probably came off as a jerk, but I've told people right away, like this role requires this, this, and this. And it doesn't sound like you have any of those three things. I don't want to waste your time. We have a lot of other open positions. I try to be grateful that they took the time to schedule time to talk to me, but I don't usually stay in an interview for 60 minutes or even 30 minutes if it's not a good use of their time either. And a lot of times I'll tell them that, like, I don't want to waste your time. This is, you're not going to go forward in the process because this role requires these things at this level that you don't yet have.
Hmm.
I mean,
AI.
if you're, as long as you're not a jerk about it, they would rather be told that that's not a good match earlier than have you take up all their time in multiple interviews before just sending them a form letter, a template letter.
So how has AI impacted recruiting already, and where's this thing going?
Well, what I'm seeing is instead of key terms throughout the resume or a big section of strengths or skills that's optimized for search engine optimization, now people can and probably should take the job description and their profile or resume and feed it into an AI tool that matches all the right terms from that job description back to your resume. So I can put HR leader at the top of my resume and highlight that, but I'm most passionate about talent acquisition and recruiting. So that's what I put underneath my name on my resume. But I've always for years taken the job description and had it on my screen or even printed it off and tried to look for all the key things that I've done and make sure that that appears on my resume. Now AI can do that for you and probably do it a lot better.
Where do you think recruiting will be in maybe 3 years? Nothing crazy, but 3 years out from now.
We're still going to need really good recruiters. The tasks that people don't enjoy. Like I've had people that I think would be great recruiters, and so back in the day, I would have them spend weeks doing just phone screens to see
Mm.
if they could tolerate that aspect of the job. And people have changed their career aspirations after a couple of weeks of doing phone screens because it's just not what they expected. So I think that recruiting coordinators can be optimized to have more challenging, interesting roles with higher quality interactions with candidates and fewer tasks.
Mhm.
So AI should be able to take the pre-screening and pre-qualifying and optimize that. So it's not just phone screen after phone screen. I've had that job before early in my career where I really as a recruiter, my role was like 90% phone screens,
Mm.
sometimes for other more senior recruiters. Um, And I think that that level of screening every candidate to the same criteria, manually over video or telephone,
Hmm.
can go away and be optimized in a better way. Better for the candidate experience as well, but also for the recruiting
Hmm.
team to have fewer tasks that have to be done, manually by a person. Makes the roles in recruiting more strategic and more business critical.
Hmm. I mean, all of our jobs are going to be impacted by AI, and I think I agree that some of the more screening entry level process, the front of the funnel, when you have 500 people applying for a director of marketing job, it'd be great if you could get a more personalized response with questions or assessment or even video, quick short form video answers that a robot could screen, which you normally would have a recruiting admin do. But then you get down to maybe your top 10 people that it stack ranks and that need more of the human interaction. So you spend your time more, you go deeper with fewer people to tell the story and try to woo them to come here.
Yep.
But I could see that being a real win, especially for high volume recruiting companies in that
Quality.
process.
That yes, that's always been the challenge for big companies with great name recognition. Either no one's applying to your postings because the job market's red hot and there's a war for talent for the skills that you need and everybody else needs them, or you have to optimize your people and your processes for the, you know, hundreds, if not over 1,000 resumes you get from every posting because so many people are attracted to your
Mhm.
brand, your name recognition, and combined with the job market can really impact the volume and how you optimize your recruiting processes and people and AI tools.
So last question was just art of recruiting. I guess how would you define what that is and how would you describe to a CEO why that's important?
I've worked for a lot of companies that say that people are our most valuable asset, but I've had the good fortune of working at a few companies, including the most recent one, where it was a strategic imperative. We've got to get the best people. We want the people that will be engaged because they know that their work matters. Everybody contributes and has an impact. And I heard our CEO at my recent company, the CEO used to tell new hires that. And so I started telling candidates that is that every role matters and we're lean and everyone's an impact player. So you're important here because you're contributing to our success. And so just believing that everybody matters and giving them an opportunity to contribute to the company's success is probably the most critical part of the art and science of recruiting. The To me, the art is more important. I've talked about empathy, I've talked about storytelling, and the art of recruiting and interacting with people and being genuine and telling them what they're getting themselves into and knowing that it's going to be a good opportunity for them because you're living it and loving it yourself is more important. The tools will change over time and you can't ignore that. You need to be constantly improving your processes and the tools that you use to enable your recruiters to be world class and your hiring managers to do a great job in selecting the best talent.
Paul, thank you so much for your time. It was great catching up and hearing your stories, a little fireside chat with you about recruiting and good memories on this. And thank you. I mean, you've hired thousands of people and have many, many people on your teams and worked with many hiring managers and CEOs. And it's just great just to hear your thoughts, to share your insights and a little wisdom going forward. So thank you so much and
Oh,
best
thanks
of
for
luck on your
having
next
me,
adventures.
Paul. Thank you for having me. You know that I enjoy and draw energy from talking about hiring, especially the art of recruiting. So I'm glad that you're doing this, and thanks for having me here.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.